All right, guys, welcome to Full Sail On Air. My name is Tyler Billingsley. I'm a lab specialist here at Full Sail University, as well as the president of the student group, the Christian Filmmakers Group. For this event, I'll be hosting Spencer Fulmar and Thurman Mason. They're from Third Brother Films, and we'll be discussing their up-and-coming movie, Generational Sins, which comes out October 6th, right?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Right. Congratulations. Looking forward to that. So let's get right into these questions. Let's start with a brief background from each of you about how you even got into filmmaking at all.
Sure. So my name is Spencer Fulmar, primarily a director, and I've been making videos pretty much since elementary school. Anytime I could, I had a lot of great professors at a public school in Pennsylvania. If I could make a video instead of a poster or writing a paper, they would let me. And so I really started doing this full time with YouTube videos before YouTube was even owned by Google. And then I started doing corporate and commercial videos so I could buy better equipment, and made my first feature film before I was 17 just to make a feature film. This is my third feature film, Generational Sins. It's just been a really interesting ride. I've been to a lot of different film schools, 4 different film schools, including NYU, and really excited about our upcoming film releasing.
So basically, your whole life, you've
Pretty
lived,
much.
breathed, and
Yep.
drank nothing but filmmaking. Cool, good,
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And Thurman?
Well, I was a film major at Temple University back a long time ago, longer than I care to remember. My life kind of took a turn after Temple, and I actually pursued a different career. Then maybe 7 years ago, Spencer and I met in seminary, of all places. And even though there was a big difference in our ages, we hit it off because of our passion for filmmaking. And after a couple of months in school, we kind of split ways, lost track of each other, and then we got reconnected about around 2 years ago. At that time, Spencer was living in Hollywood. He was working on his third film. I think we had maybe a third draft of Generational Sins complete. He called me up and asked me if I'd be interested in producing. And I said, sure, because I had no idea what we were getting into. So I flew out to LA, and we actually made a road trip to Las Vegas for a broadcast equipment show, NAB. Okay. And it was during that weekend that we talked about the kind of films that we wanted to make and how we saw ourselves as filmmakers. We put some money in the bank, opened up a bank account, formed a company, and made a movie last year.
You went about it the right way. Nice. I worked in AB one time, and for students, if you guys ever get a chance to go out there, it's very cool. Like all the latest and greatest gadgets and programs. It's very cool to get out there. So how did you guys? You mentioned that you met in seminary and stuff like that, and then you sort of parted ways. What exactly? I mean, obviously the film brought you guys back together, but you sort of left some stuff out. You told him you didn't tell him everything, but I mean, how did you form? You started a business, stuff like that. But what is it? Do you think about you guys that made you want to start like a lifelong thing together of making movies, not just one, but moving on and working together for quite some time?
For me, it's been great having Thurman on board. We do have a generational difference, but we both have the same passion and the same drive. Someone I've been looking for in my life, is someone that would run alongside me. And Thurman was that guy, right? I didn't anticipate it, didn't expect it, but so often you might have a business partner or someone like that might, help you out a little bit, help you out on the weekends, after work, something like that, and that could work out fine. And Thurman was in a space in his life, a time in his life, that he could run alongside me and we could be proper business partners and that we could pursue this full out. And that's really what it took, especially to make a film and now have an operating film company and now in the development of a slate of films.
Yeah, we were very fortunate because the fit was so good. And we actually complement each other. The fact that we do have an age difference gives us, slightly different perspectives on markets, on, scripts, on everything. But as you go forward in your career as a filmmaker and you start partnering up and collaborating with people, it's essential that you work with people on the same page. At least in my opinion, it is. especially at the independent film level, where you're wearing so many hats and you're so dependent on the work of other people who you don't always have the luxury of paying scale to. And so it's very, very important that you be able to work with people who have similar vision and will complement what you're trying to do.
And it adds a good synergy, and passion doesn't care about age, so that's good. As a Christian-based independent production company, how do you handle the David and Goliath scenario with big budget Hollywood and independent?
Well, that's a good question. We, in our experience in the last year with Generational Sins, we really haven't encountered any unusual or surprising issues with Goliath. I'm not even sure Goliath knows that we were there. They've discovered us in the last few months, but as we were going through the process, they really weren't there. I don't know that that's really been a factor. Do you?
I don't want to jump ahead, but I think there's a lot of, like the film industry, the Hollywood movie industry is very enigmatic as far as the big guy and the smaller guys and the studios and what their concern is of independent filmmakers. We definitely have been on the radar, and we've stirred the pot quite a bit, which is quite remarkable from what we had or resources available to us and what we were able to accomplish. In our Goliath, I'm not sure who that person would be except for the major studios, but it's almost like another industry for the studios, especially compared to the independent filmmaker. It's like a whole nother world. It's much more corporate and bureaucratic than it is what we're doing.
Cool. And nowadays, with such accessibility in the industry, it has opened up a lot of doors for independents. You mentioned even YouTube. I mean, there are people out making movies and all kinds of stuff. I know students have seen them or maybe even are part of them in some cases. So that helps a lot too. And it's cool that you guys can look forward and this is what we're doing, and whatever else is going on is going on. But but we're gonna make our stuff.
That's right.
That's a great attitude to have about it. As you know, filmmaking has kind of two sides. You have the creative side and the business side of things, and you guys have worked that out really well amongst yourselves. But so how exactly does Third Brother Films deal with that that sort of dichotomy of the work there?
It's worked out very well to this point. I mean, Spencer obviously is focused on the creative and does an excellent job at that. And I'm able to have a little bit of creative input into it, and so that kind of scratches that itch that I have. But ultimately, you got to pay attention to the bottom line if you want to be a successful filmmaker. So you need to have somebody that's going to be pinching pennies, watching the budget, and making sure that you're making wise decisions.
It's not me.
Yeah,
it's usually not the creative person, right? I mean,
usually not. No. It's funny, but when we were actually on set, at the time, I didn't realize how many Marlboros and Monster beverages we were buying. But next time out, we'll probably keep a little better track of that.
And do you guys find that kind of compartmentalizing? I mean, obviously you've got free reign to help here and there or whatever, but does compartmentalizing help with that?
Thurman kind of described it as almost like there's a wall between creative and business and producing. And whenever I'm not on set, I, as an independent filmmaker, and as you guys will also have to do, you have to become business-minded. I did not excel at math and accounting. I don't know if I even passed, probably not. But you have to get good at that if you want to keep making films. And it's great to have someone like I have in Thurman, who is my business-minded individual, my executive producer, and especially on set, because as a director, you're going to have enough to deal with on set with creative and creative choices. And whenever I'm in that mode, I am not caring if, for instance, a little example from one of the scenes we shot here in Sanford, I told a production assistant to buy dirt, and he bought dirt for like $40, which I don't know how that's even possible. And Thurman was able to step in sometime in that transaction and be able to just find like dirt in the woods that was free. And I'm not thinking, I don't have a business mind on set, so it's great to have a wall, even for me, because I am involved very much in producing before and after the set. But on set, it's great to have Thurman and its other producers who are able to make those calls, and which frees me up to just be creative in that special, days on set.
Well, I think what helps too is the fact that you are aware of those things, and you're aware too, like when he's in that mode, you kind of have to put your mode on and be like, all right, I got to be even more mindful because I know he's not even thinking about it. And it makes sense because you are just the creative. Yeah, you're in that zone. But the fact that when they do step in, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be so irksome, and you're like, stop bothering me with that. Like, you still have that in the back of your mind, at least you're understanding, look, if I want to make this movie, I need to have this here. And so I think that working together and being mindful of it helps a lot too, because I know there's a lot of people who would, whatever, $40, whatever, just get it. That's all I need. Just get it. And at the end of the day, you're going, all right, well, guess we can't make the rest of the movie because we spent so much on it, half of it. So
yeah, I think for directors to have a sense of producing is vitally important, because I have classmates even from NYU who never understood the realities of being a producer and being a businessman and finding someone like a business partner like I have in Thurman, and you can't do anything, right, besides starting over on set as a PA or many other things that may never come to fruition.
Yeah, and a half a movie is not going to help you, right? It could be the greatest half movie ever, but you're not going to do anything with it.
Yep.
So cool. Let's get specifically into generational sins, right? It's controversial, and it was made that way, right? So explain to us exactly why you crafted it that way.
So Generational Sins, the log line for the film, it's about two brothers who return home to reconcile with their alcoholic and abusive father. So it's like a romantic comedy. It's a pretty heavy drama. It is unique in the fact that in the film, we explicitly talk about what is, as an artist, my greatest truth, which is Jesus and Christianity. And yet we do it in such a way that isn't judgmental or condemning or preachy. And it's very accessible to anyone of any faith, any background, any religious experience. Only probably a third or a quarter of our cast and crew had any kind of religious affiliation. Our lead actors were not religious. And yet it's great because we've shown this film at religious universities and non-religious universities, and audiences both like it, and that was our intention from the beginning. Now, what's different from, I think, some of the controversy is that because we're talking about our own personal faith, and I think artists are supposed to talk about their greatest truth, so we're talking about our faith in a way that hasn't traditionally been done in what's known as the faith-based market, and so it's very uncensored, it's very gritty. There's some colorful language in it that I'm sure we all might have heard in our lives, and so it's unique in the fact that it is not family friendly, and a lot of traditional faith-based films are synonymous to family friendly, and our film is definitely for adults, and it deals with adult issues, and so that's a lot of the controversy.
And it actually got a PG-13 rating.
Yes.
On it, so
everyone thought it was going to be R. We intended it to be PG-13. And yet it's still quite controversial, and that shows you kind of where the market's at right now. A PG-13 film is controversial.
Yeah. And Thurman, thinking about it on the producer side of that, did you struggle with that concept?
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, Spencer and I were really on the same page. Those are the kinds of films that we wanted to make. And, we had, well, first of all, as we're Christians and we're filmmakers, and obviously that affects our worldview. And I think any filmmaker, any artist for that matter, ought to have a specific worldview, because without one, you really don't have anything to say. And we were thinking about our particular worldview. It's interesting. Back in 2004, Mel Gibson made this movie. You might have heard of it. It was called The Passion of the Christ. And even to this day, it remains the highest grossing R-rated movie in history, upwards of $600 million. So even though there may have been faith-based films before The Passion, Mel kind of put the genre on the map. Hollywood discovered there was a lot of money to be made with these kinds of films, and so multiple production companies followed, trying to imitate his success. And Hollywood has had some successes, but also a lot of failures because they're still learning how to market to that audience. So out of this faith-based genre that rose up, Spencer and I looked at it, and we pretty much determined that these were films that were made by Christians for Christian consumption, and outside of the choir and the religious community, there wasn't a lot of other people embracing those films. That's not what we wanted to do. We wanted to make the kind of existential films that Hollywood has been so great in making over the past decades, but we wanted to write, into those storylines, Christian characters with the kind of worldview that we have. And so that's why you see these really hard, gritty films like Generational Sins, but in those films you'll see faith elements that are strong, that are provocative, they're not judgmental, they're just real. And that's the kind of films that we make. And so in many respects, we're kind of on the tip of a spear here. And, we like to think that we're creating a brand new genre of film, because it certainly isn't going to fit in with your classic faith-based movie. And we had actually, last week, we trademarked the phrase hard faith. And, that's what we're using now to describe this new genre. We think that if we prove the concept and there's some success here in the next few weeks, there'll be plenty of people trying to imitate it, follow it, but we'll always be very proud that we were the first there.
Cool. And you've done your research, and you think there's a market there for it, and like you said, up and coming. And of course, the faith-based thing is come and gone back with Cecil B. DeMille and Ten Commandments and Ben-Hur and all that, and the waves, and so it does come and go. And I think you guys have sort of hit that sort of not even a niche per se, but a good way of kind of grasping both sides and bringing a lot of people together into that without being the preachy message and all that. All of this being intentionally done, and it's not like you guys just willy-nilly came out and did this. I mean, you've really done a lot of research, a lot of study. How does storytelling, specifically in the way that you guys have done it, not just the crafting of the message and all that, but the storytelling, how does it nowadays have, how impactful is it still nowadays with CGI and everything done in post, we'll fix it in post, all that kind of stuff. Is storytelling, you think, still extremely relevant?
Yes. I mean, it's absolutely vital. And this past box office was probably one of the worst. This summer box office is probably one of the worst in over a decade. There's different projections on how many years it's been, but it's definitely over a decade. It's one of the worst summer box offices. And that shows you, especially from what the studios are creating, whenever it's a remake or a tentpole superhero movie, and a lot of completely unoriginal content, right? Either remakes or adaptations. And you can even see it in what the Academy is celebrating, what Netflix, their success is based on. It's these stories that everyone else thought were too risky, and they're original stories, and they're real life stories, and they're not CGI, and they're stories that audiences want. I mean, even the Moonlight being the Academy winner, it's the real, gritty, true life stories about human existence and what it means to wake up every day and try and make sense of your life and continue on another day. And that's not CGI, and that's not expensive, but it is a really good story. I'm a millennial, right? And I didn't grow up in the church, so I have a different perspective as far as a lot of these faith-based films or religion is concerned. But what I hear a lot, and maybe you guys also hear it, is that the millennial generation has a really short attention span. But I don't think that's necessarily true, because especially what we're talking about with feature films, we still pay good money to give our undivided attention to a single source for sometimes up to 2 hours, because it's a good story, right? And you'll tell your friends not to text and snap anyone that's talking, because you just want to fall in love with that story. And that shows you how important stories truly are. And this is an original story. Generational Sins is not a fantastical story. It's not sci-fi. It's not surreal. It's a very human, relatable. Unfortunately, it's a very relatable story to many people, no matter what your background is. And yet, it is an original story, and you can't. Even our marketers try to compare it to another film, and you can't compare it to anything else. And that's important.
Well, that helps you stand out with your movie as well, from a marketing standpoint and so forth. How long did it take you to put this story together?
I moved to Los Angeles, California in January 2016, and I moved in with my cousin who wrote the first draft of the script, and then I was the co-writer of the film. And so we wrote the script together. The first draft pumped out in like 2 weeks. The final shooting draft officially, maybe draft 7, maybe draft 9 by the time we got it to set. Official, right? There's probably 100 unofficial drafts. That was over 6-7 months, but still pretty fast. And it really came together quick. My cousin and I had always wanted to work together. We both worked in the film industry in different sectors. And then whenever we came together and we both told a story that we're both overwhelmingly passionate about, that we met every single day to write and refine, and anytime we had a meal together, we would talk about it because it meant that much to us, it kind of wrote itself. And it feels that way, right, on the screen. It feels like an essential story and not just a distraction.
And those are often the better stories too, when they sort of start writing themselves and the characters take on a life of their own. We talk about like time-wise, it took 6 months to write or this or that. Thinking about it though in a more compact type of way, I mean, you sort of referenced it, like every time we got together, we were working on this. I mean, how many, like giving us hours wise, I mean, how many serious real time did you put toward it?
A lot. I mean, it's crazy. If I try to think about how many hours, I mean, it was really our main obsession for 6-7 months. It really was.
Good.
Rewriting it, writing it. And I love writing scripts. I mean, it's the greatest thing you can do, especially as filmmakers, because you're building your company, right? You're building your brand. You're making asset for yourself, and it's free. It's completely free. All it requires is your hard work and discipline and skipping a few hours of sleep. And if you stay up until the sun comes up, you probably have a pretty good story.
Oh, and sometimes that can be, difficult to do, especially if you're not into the story or something like that. Yeah. And so, and I ask it that way because, we can say like, oh, well, yeah, it took about 6 months, but realistically, maybe you only met once a week or something like that. But it really comes down to, when you're making good stories and stuff like that, is really spending a lot of time on it. It's not just 6 months. It's really compacted. It's hours and hours and hours over and over. And you mentioned like drafts. Well, the official draft is 7, but there's really a whole lot more. You don't really write a new draft until a certain amount is done and stuff like that. So, it's not something you just sit down and write, a few days and we're done. Right. You're really crafting an entire story and creating new characters and all that. And that's something I think a lot of students can relate to and stuff like that is, I know here we're accelerated programs a lot of times, so you don't have as much time to do that. But when you get out there, you really do need to spend some time making a good story so that when you go to make it, you are actually making a good story, not something that's been thrown together or something. And I think we see no offense to a lot of the Hollywood movies, but I think a lot of their stuff is kind of thrown together, and especially sequels, like, oh, we got to get it out, make something else. And it's hard to live up to something that they spent a lot more time in the beginning crafting that story, and you really see that in the sequel where they didn't spend that much time. So I applaud all filmmakers like yourselves who spend that kind of time, dedicated time, dealing with a story. Getting kind of into the production of it, what kind of gear did you guys go with, and why specifically that kind of gear? Sure.
Well, we shot the film with a red weapon. The camera really had only been available for a couple of months when we shot it, and we shot it in 6K. Rather than buying the equipment, we rented the equipment with technology moving as quickly as it does, and already the helium has replaced the equipment that we shot a film with last year. It never benefits you to invest your money in depreciating assets like that. So where it's possible to rent that equipment, I advise that you do that. That's what we did. But we wanted we knew early on that we wanted a specific look for this film, and it was necessary to get that look to use that equipment, in our opinion.
So you figured a lot of that stuff out in pre-production. You had a visual in mind that you wanted. Did you guys shop around a lot, or did you know from the get-go, like, this, we want to use the top of the line?
We had used Red before. You know, there's always a big discussion between Ari and Red. And we love Red. It's great grain, especially at 6K. You can do a lot in post. So we were pretty set on that camera. And then whenever we realized that we could have the weapon with the 6K Dragon sensor, and we found a price, we did shop around for the price because there's limited resources on this film. But when we found a really great deal from a private renter, we pulled the trigger. We shopped around. We looked at C100s and C300s and other cameras, and so glad that we put the money in the camera and in the lens. We had a great lens selection, all prime lenses, cinema lenses.
Nice. How do you go about prioritizing? Obviously certain things are going to require more money than other things. What process do you go through to say, you know what, this is really the area where the majority of the money should go?
Well, that's a good question. I think during principal photography, the camera was obviously the priority. And the interesting thing for me is, after we had the film in the can, we made some decisions about post that we did not originally envision. And we had to put, a considerable amount of money that had not originally been budgeted into post. And we did that for one primary reason. When we got the film, when it was cut, first cut, we had some people look at it, and I think we kind of surprised ourselves. I mean, it did better than what we had hoped for. It exceeded our expectations. Good. And at that point in time, we actually started thinking seriously about the possibility of having a theatrical release, because that, again, was something that we did not originally envision. But with some professionals out in Hollywood that we were able to meet, they encouraged us to do that, and we decided to do it. So for us, that priority became post-production. And I think when you see the film, the final mix is right on, and the sound design is incredible. We had some professionals color the film. They had colored, Birth of a Nation and quite a few other films like that. And it's probably increased the production value of this movie tenfold over what we thought it was originally going to be. So you never know where your priorities are going to be. You kind of are in a constant state of making that decision and processing all those things as you're making your film.
So you go out with a certain vision, but so you think it behooves student or any production maker to be malleable, to be able to just go with the flow,
Absolutely. I mean, that is the creative process. That's what cinema is all about, collaborating with creative people and watching this thing begin to take on a life of its own.
And it's cool to hear that also from the business side of it as well. Like, we talked about you having the being in that creative zone, something like that. But you're able to see it from the other side. You know what? We can do this. We do have some budget, moving around that we can do. And you know what? This is worth going this way. You mentioned that you had some people watch it. Did you guys have a test audience, or did you have like personal friends or professionals who exactly watched it?
Well, we didn't have a test audience per se, because we pretty much locked the film when we started showing it around, as opposed to test audiences that may inspire you to go back and change your film. We were past that point. But we did want feedback, and that feedback became very critical and important to us in terms of marketing the film later on, because we were still in the process of trying to define this particular market. This film is kind of it's sort of revolutionary for reasons we've already discussed, and nobody has ever made a film like this before, and Hollywood becomes very comfortable in their business model. They look for certain types of film. Those are the films that they want to distribute and promote. So when you come up with them with something a little bit different, They don't know what to do with that. So we needed some feedback later on to help us identify where our market was and to make sure that we didn't spend money foolishly trying to sell this film to somebody that would never be interested in buying it. And that was challenging. And I'll tell you, the whole process of making a movie like this, you may think that it's done when you get the film in the can, you marry the audio and the video, but the work really just starts, because distribution and marketing is a huge battle and it's a huge challenge.
Well, let's kind of get into that part of it. You know, we've gone through the creative part. You guys shot in Sanford and Eustis. You mentioned that here in Florida. You worked with Film Orlando, the film commission, local film commission, and Southeast SAG. You worked with them as well. How was that?
They're great to work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Film Orlando, they did everything they could to kind of, grease the skids and helped us with the permitting. Our permitting requirements were not all that complex because we were only shooting for 4 days, and we didn't require a lot of permits, but we found them to be very congenial and helpful, and helping us with the applications, because normally when you see those applications, you got all this stuff in here and you're thinking, how in the world am I supposed to answer that? And a lot of it really isn't designed for small independent filmmakers, but it's always nice to have people in the office tell you, don't worry about that, we'll fill that in later, or whatever the case may be. So it was good working with them.
And so they really are there to help the filmmaker.
Mm-hmm. They are, right? They're not trying to create extra hurdles. They want to help you.
That's how everyone views them, though, right?
That's how some permit office and some unions are, but Southeast, we're really fortunate.
Good.
Very accommodating, very helpful.
I will say this, though. I think sometimes they get a lot of people walking through there.
Yeah.
And sometimes the people that are there have expectations that really aren't very realistic about, the kind of movie they want to make and what they need to make it. But we didn't have that problem. I think if you go there and you're a legitimate filmmaker and you really have a project that you can explain to them, they're very helpful.
Yeah, they're not there for those types of things. They're there for more of the permitting and stuff like that.
Right.
Getting into distribution, exhibition distribution stuff. What kind of distribution windows did you guys go with, and what helped you in making that selection?
So on February 20th, I'll just say real quick, February 20th, unlocked the film, right? We watched the film at our picture house. The 5.1, I've been married to the picture. I got to see it finally, and it never got changed again, February 20th. This is quite some time after February. And that is all that we've been doing, is marketing and getting a proper distributor, and now doing press and ramp up for the release of the film. And that's a long time, right? The creatives ended for me as a director on February 20th for this film. And since then, Thermo told a little bit about just the journey of finding a proper distributor, because we had many offers, right? Or different people that were interested in taking the film, different sales agents, people pretended to be distributors but were really sales agents, and then finding a proper distributor that would be able to take our film to the finish line.
And to give that in perspective, it's like half a year dealing with this stuff. It's 6-7 months.
Yep.
Dealing with just marketing and distribution.
It's not like we just waited around. Like we have an office in Los Angeles. We invited people over to watch the film, marketers to watch the film, distributors to watch the film. We did a Warner Brothers screening to attract some higher level distributors, producers. We went to trade organizations and film markets. So it's not like we were just waiting around or biding our time. We were active, very active, nonstop, trying to find a proper distributor.
Yeah, when we completed the film and back in February, when Spencer was done with it, we had a couple of unique challenges, and the least of which was that nobody knew who we were. It's not like we had an extensive library out there that we could go to. So selling was a little bit problematic as a consequence of that. But we worked very hard, and we got the word out, and we started getting some offers from distributors. Nothing that really impressed us, because somebody will offer to distribute your film, and there's all kinds of people in Hollywood that are willing to take your money and help you spend it. Okay, you have to remember that when it comes to distribution. Sure, bring us $150,000 for P&A, and we're going to get you here and here and here and here.
I'll help you do that too, by the way, if you're.
Yeah, there's a lot of hot air out in Hollywood. So we looked at those offers, and looking through the offers and talking to these distributors were also an educational process for us, because we learned a lot about how they were trying to sell us and what we needed to do to sell them. But we never caught, and nobody ever caught our eye. And then we had a friend that was actually a producer on Hacksaw Ridge, and Terry had introduced us to a publicist that he had been using frequently in the past. We hired a publicist early on before we actually had a distributor. That turned out to be a very smart move. It was a great benefit to us because Mark did a tremendous job as a publicist, and eventually he brought some other distributors to us, people that he had relationships with over the years, and we decided to do a deal with one of them. We just cut the original deal, domestic U.S. and Canada, with Freestyle releasing, and then we signed a contract with another distributor for our international sales. But it was a lot of work, and it was again, it was another 6-month process.
Yeah. And when you sign over a film, you're giving them all rights, for 7, 10, 12, 15 years. It's a big deal.
Yeah, so you definitely shop around and make sure you're happy with it as well. And then you may have heard too. There's a lot of networking going, involved. Friends you may know, or people of people who know. Utilizing those networks as much as you can to help out your project. And then maybe down the road work with them again on something else or help them out. It's definitely reciprocal. I want to kind of get back real quick and kind of tie the two together. You had mentioned, shooting with the red weapon and all that and going with the 6K. Did those decisions, how impactful are they toward helping distribute and market?
Like Thurman talked about spending the money in finishing post, using top-of-the-line equipment, and then having a story worth listening and watching. If you have that story, if you have a story that's worth investing that kind of money, and you can make it look like a film, right, with the proper equipment, with the proper budget in post-production, then it's quite essential. Because if our film our film looks like a movie, right? If it doesn't look like a movie, if it feels like an independent film, it might have some fun at film festivals. But if you want to sell it, if you want to make more movies, it needs to at least reach a certain production quality that it can be marketable. So it's important. It's very important. It looks like a film. It needs to look like a film. It needs to sound like a film. And because no one's going to say like, oh, well, they had this budget and give you the benefit of the doubt. No one looks at your budget. And besides Q&As like this that we have whenever we're at colleges and we show the film has to stand on its own 2 feet on October 6th. We're not going to be there to defend it. It has to stand on its own feet, and we have to put in the money and choose the equipment wisely so it can stand up to any other film that our audiences can watch.
And if you're going to theaters, there's a certain expectation that audience have that you have to reach, and you have to. I think it's a good lesson to learn before you go out and make any movie. If that's where your final goal is to get there, you got to be able to make that production quality, that production value beforehand. Make sure you're going to reach that in the long run. All right. Well, we have 2 additional special guests, some PAs that actually worked on the film. Ian Chastain and Alex Reynoso. Are they available?
I hope so. Yeah.
All right. Ian and Alex, they're both here. What did you guys do on the film, and how does it feel to have something that you worked on actually go into the cinemas?
You can go first, Chris.
I was a PA on it for about a week or so, and I did everything from making runs to helping camera team doing whatever they do to setting up lights and just everything they needed me to do. And watching it all start to come together and finally have a release date and everything was really cool. I'm excited to see the final product of it.
Yeah, and How often did Spencer yell at you?
Spencer was super nice. I came into it really like worried that this was going to be like a high tense situation. I walk in at like 4 a.m. the first day, and they're all like, "Oh, hey, the PA's here," and they're all super nice and everything. So it was a great experience.
Good. And how does that help when you're out there working on that, to have a crew that gets along and has a decent respect for everybody?
I've been on sets where crews do not get along, and that was a really good experience. That was a good starting thing where it's like, oh, these guys are really, everyone flows together. There's no infighting. There's no complaining about other departments. It was all really nice.
Awesome.
Thank you, Alex. Good to see you again, man. Where are you at?
I'm currently back in Texas visiting my family, but I'm heading up to New York soon to start working up there.
Okay.
Hit us up for our next film. You're great.
You look like you're sitting there at Reggie's.
It's just my parents' house.
Awesome. And Ian?
When I was working, I actually worked up in the Pennsylvania area with them. So they flew me up there. I worked with them as a PA, but I did everything from running waters to everyone, to helping block traffic when we needed it, to helping with basically everything that needed to be done to get this movie rolling and completed.
Hey, Ian, how are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
I'm doing good, man. I just wanted to tell you how proud I am of your accomplishments scholastically, and what you did on set with us up in Pennsylvania. I'm sure you remember, and I'm very happy to see you here.
Yeah, it was probably it's been one of the few many film sets I've been on, and going into it, I think I was up all night the night before, and I was like worried that I was gonna mess something up or something. And once I got there, everyone was a welcome, and it was a great experience, and I enjoyed every moment of it.
And just working on a film where everyone does get along, how does that help you as a PA? Like, does it make you want to, you end up working longer, you're not as upset, you're willing to do more stuff?
It's more of when you work with some people that are passionate and they're fun to work with, you want to do more and make the product better. And you want the movie to be the best it can be and be basically the best. But I think there was a couple nights where we got really late into the night, but everyone kept a good positive attitude, and we pushed through and got up the next morning just to do it all again.
I see both of them nodding their heads. They seem to remember that specifically.
That one bar scene.
Oh, gracious.
Yeah.
But having having that sort of mentality around a set really helps you come together as a crew rather than just a worker.
Yeah, it basically makes you feel like you're not just working together, but you're bonding and becoming like friends and family together.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree with that.
So it's more of like you're making these long-term relationships.
Did we lose him?
Did we freeze?
Oh,
there we go.
No.
And you guys learn a lot while working on the film?
I would say so, yeah. I think we definitely both learned a lot, probably.
Oh, I definitely learned a lot. I learned what real world compared to how at Full Sail we have the real world experience, but we have those teachers there to back us up. And then we have the real world out there, and we have people that we've never met before and we're just getting to help us teach. And so it's basically what we learned at Full Sail compared to what we learned out in the real world. They go like hand in hand on the people helping each other. Everything
we did at Full Sail really like prepared us for that. Like we came in knowing everything that we need to do, and I never felt like I was like at a disadvantage from everyone else. I felt like I was pretty on par, just like working with everyone else. So I knew what they were doing. It was really nice.
Good.
Definitely agree with that. The Full Sail students, Alan and Ian, they were sometimes head and shoulders even above our regular hired crew. They were very knowledgeable and very hardworking.
Thank you, appreciate it.
I mean it.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was fun having you guys on set, and you have an open invitation on the next film.
Definitely.
We'll be in touch.
Both of you.
Oh, no problem. I'll see you guys in a couple days or
That's right.
in a week.
Yep, in
Yeah,
a
we'll
week on
see
the
you
world
at the,
premiere.
we'll see you at the world premiere.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to
Yeah.
it.
Got my brand new suit, right? And push for it.
All
Press for
right.
it.
There you go.
Awesome, thank you guys. So it's really
you.
cool
No
that you guys are, you're going from what you're doing here at Full Sail, and it's just a continuing move on. You're always still learning. You're learning new things. You're working with different people, and really being able to forge really long-lasting relationships that you could work on other movies again. And you definitely want to leave any production with them going, you know what, I'd love to work with that person again, as opposed to like, you're never going to work not only with me, but everyone I talk to, I'm going to tell them don't ever work with this person again. And word of mouth is really a huge thing. So make sure you end with a good lasting impression, and you're there to help out. And when you can be with an actual crew, like I said, as opposed to just a worker, you're just there to do stuff. You become part of it. You're part of making this cool production, and then to see it go to the cinemas and all that. I mean, it's a very cool feeling, especially for the first time. So let's move into our Q&A session here. I know we got a lot of questions here. Don't forget to raise your hands. We'll have the mics kind of going around, and we also have people online as well who may have some questions. All right, there we go. We got someone to start. We got a microphone. Oh, yeah?
So I figured I'd ask a question. If you don't mind sharing a little bit about some of the marketing activities that you've done so far for the film.
Well, about 2 months ago, we had met with our distributor and built a team. We've been having regular team conferences every week for the past 4 or 5 weeks. There's probably 15 to 17 people on that team. We have people that are responsible for social media, for digital platforms, for theatrical screenings. Our publicist is part of that team. We've got a PR company. So there's a big group of people that are all working together to promote this film. There's just a tremendous amount of work involved in that. So, it's a necessity for anybody, even with a small theatrical release like we're doing. It's just a prerequisite.
And to kind of add to that, how important is it? You said you've got someone dealing with all these different departments. How important is it to have that as opposed to trying to do everything yourself?
You can't do everything yourself. I mean, this experience with Generational Sins, it was classic independent filmmaking at its best. You heard these two guys talk about what they felt like on set and how people got along together. You don't have any other option. With a film like that, with any independent film, you're never gonna have enough capital, you're never gonna have enough talent, you're never gonna have enough equipment, you're never gonna have enough days. I mean, that's what that process is all about. So if you don't have people on set that you can bond together and turn into a team, because it's a team sport, and you can't afford to have people who are out, lone rangers on their own, doing their own thing, because that's a curse, that's death, and there's not enough days on set to repair damage that could be done in the snap of a finger. So, that's what you're looking at when you start into this industry, unless you happen to be lucky enough to, work for Spielberg or somebody, first time out.
Well, and if you have that kind of attitude, you may start in this industry, but you won't go too far. I mean, you just won't receive another crew call, because who wants to work with someone who is trying to take over or not do what they're there to do?
Right, and the producers are looking at you. It's a trial run. We have people that were on set that we will definitely be reaching out to and probably working with for the rest of our film career. And then there are other people that that's just not the case. So, keep that in mind.
Yep. I've got another question here.
Cool. Tessa, all right. This one is about film financing. film financing. I wanted to ask for independent film, what are some specific steps that you guys take to bring in the initial financing for the project? And are you tapping into your personal networks for this, or are these companies or studios you have relationships with?
Well, when we capitalized our company, Spencer and I put in our own personal money, and that's how we seeded this project. We then went to family and friends and associates and raised the balance of the money that we needed to complete principal photography. We never got involved in any of the other traditional financing mechanisms like studios or anything like that, because we were too far along in the process. We didn't really have any name talent attached, although I must say that our actors did a phenomenal job, and we did have one lead male actor that was a big star in Australia, but people don't really know who he is in the U.S. Ironic, it was ironic, but we wound up actually spending more money in post and P&A than we did to actually shoot the film. But you have to decide what type of budget you're going to work with and make some realistic assumptions about how you're going to raise that money. It's one thing to make a $10,000 independent short film. It's another thing to make a $250,000 film. So, it depends on the scale. Start with something that you can realistically achieve. And that would be some advice I'd give everybody. Make a $10,000 movie. Take what you learn from that, make a $50,000 movie. Take what you learn from that, make a $250,000 movie, and before you know it, you're making $1 million movies. But you can't jump to the top unless you've inherited a large fortune.
And each one of those that you make can help sell the next one, because people want to know, what have you done? Show me something you've done before that's been successful. And I would add too, plan out what you want to do with it all. Not only what you want to make, but where you want to go, what your distribution windows are. Are you just going to do YouTube for the first one? Are you going to go select theaters, film festivals? And that's going to help budget out where, especially on the post side of it or the distribution side, how much money you're going to need out of your budget to do those things as well. So, all right, we have another question. Let's get you have a mic?
I have a question. Are y'all gonna? Do y'all know? Are y'all in the black yet on the film? Just out of curiosity, like more of a finance question.
You want me to answer that one?
Sure.
You give me all the tough questions. No, we're not. The short answer is no. We're not in the black. We are hoping to begin. We've got a few pre-sales from tickets that have been on sale for about a week, but you've got a significant amount of capital that you lay out to make a movie, and then you have to wait until it starts to come back. So we're just at that point now where, right, exactly. The film, you can't even buy the film right now. You can't download it until the 6th of October. I mean, you can go on iTunes, and there's a link for you to pre-order the film. And you could. We are playing here in Orlando at the
Universal City Walk.
Yeah, Universal AMC City Walk. It'll be there on the 6th of October, and I think you can go on AMC's website and you can pre-order tickets. But that's the only revenue that we're going to see until after this film releases.
Yeah, I was just curious about that.
Mm-hmm.
And for those who maybe aren't in the finance savvy part of it, can you explain to them what exactly it means to be in the black and all that?
Well, I mean, it's kind of a simple accounting concept. It means that you've made back all of your expenses and you're starting to make a profit. I mean, it's not too complicated. If it costs you $1 million to make a movie, and you've made $999,000 in box office or other revenue, then you're still not in the black. You're still in the red.
Yeah, I'm in the business side. I'm actually a film student, so I'm kind of just curious about that
Yeah, and that that's something that can occur, hopefully, pretty quickly after your film gets released. But unfortunately, for some people, it never occurs. Even Scorsese himself lost a bundle this year on silence. I think we know one investor that lost $40 million just on his own. So it's a risky business.
And while they're out finding another person to ask questions, how much of your budget? Because obviously it doesn't end. We talked about this is half a year now, still going in marketing, distribution, all of that. So it's not ending. How much would you say of your budget are you still kind of using just to do the stuff you're doing now? Generally,
I'm not sure. I know what you're asking.
Like a percentage wise, or just generally speaking, how much you got your budget for pre-production stuff, production, post-production, exhibition, distribution, but a lot of people don't think about the fact that it's still not ending yet. You're still going to be doing it's okay. It comes out in cinemas, but we still got other stuff we need to do.
Everything has already been laid out, with the exception of some minor expenses now associated with the tour that we're on, promoting the film, things like that. But as far as major expenses are concerned, that's they've all been expended at this point in time. So we're not seeing the cash go out any longer like it was a few months ago.
Of course, yeah.
Right.
But you got DVDs. From a Hollywood perspective, they still got commercials they're putting out for those types of things. You guys have your website you're running, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of people don't, they. Especially depending on where you're coming from, production-wise, I was camera operator, I'm done at the end of production. I don't have anything else to do with it. There's a lot more that keeps going on. We saw a few years ago for Back to the Future, they made Back in Time, which was a documentary about was it August 21st or something like that, 2015 or something like that, and where we are now. So here we are, a movie that was made, 30 years ago or something, and they're still making something about the movie that the talent's still having to come back and talk about, the director's still having to come. So not that you guys are necessarily going to go 30 years from now, but there's still a lot to be done even now. You're doing a whole tour on it, trying to get it promoted and get it out there. So your job as producers, they don't end, once, okay, it's coming out in cinemas, we're done. Well, there's still more you got to be doing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You keep thinking that, now you've finished editing the film, now we just sell it and get a distributor and then we're done. And then you get a distributor and then you realize that you need to do marketing. And even like the marketing question that we had before, you're constantly thinking of ways to promote your film. It's what you wake up in the morning thinking, and it's what you go to sleep whenever you can. And you think about what's a new article or an op-ed or an angle, because your marketers are doing their job, right? But you are always going to be the person who's going to be most passionate and work the hardest for your project. Even if you hire the very best, whoever they are, as the originators, you need to own that. You're never going to rest. And I don't know what the next stage holds. I still have some of these preconceptions that, once the film comes out, then maybe we can take a breather. That might not be the case, right? We might continue going to universities, we might continue doing screenings and whatnot and promoting the film even 30 years later. And in the meantime, start working on the next film so we can get back on set and start the whole thing all over again.
And you may end up doubling your work at that point.
Yeah.
But you're passionate about it, so you're willing to do that.
Yeah. I mean, you just wish you could sleep less so you can work more.
Awesome. All right, do we have more questions?
Yeah, I have a two-part question. The first part is, did you use outside musical direction, or was it in your music all in-house? And how much of your budget was dedicated to music, whether it be composing or music licensing or anything like that?
I'll answer part one. You want to get part two?
Yeah.
So part one, we used a composer. It was a guy that actually, and I know that there's a big music department here at Full Sail. I could speak a lot on just composers and how to get a job, but our guy did everything he could possibly do to win us over. He was great. He worked harder than anyone else. He delivered faster, and when we didn't know him from Adam. We had considered a lot of other composers, and this guy who's from New Zealand reached out to us from IMDb Pro and saw that we were in post-production, and he reached out to us, and we'd already kind of filled up our lineup of composers we were going to test out. And this guy was probably like number 9 in the lineup, but we weren't even sure if we were going to audition him to see if he could create the sound of Generational Sins. And so he reached out to us, just completely cold email from New Zealand, and he showed some of his work, and obviously was professional and courteous. And so we listened to some of his tracks, and they sound like they could maybe work. But we Skyped everyone. Like, we Skyped a guy from Moscow, we Skyped a guy, some British guys, and Mike, who is from New Zealand, and then a lot of people in the States. And what our test was, and this is maybe asking a lot, but what our test was is, you deliver to us, like, we're going to give you a scene. You're all going to get the same scene. I don't know if they knew how many other competition there was. But we give them a scene, and you compose something with little to no direction, and there's no temp music. And then we will decide who we're going to go with, who we're going to take to the ball. And Mike, unlike a lot of his competition, he didn't wait weeks, and he didn't complain or anything. And he delivered what turned out to be the main theme of the entire film. He delivered that in 12 hours, sent it back to us. He's in New Zealand, so by the time we woke up in the morning, even though we had still 3 more composers to audition, we were pretty set on Mike, and he delivered like that the entire film. He was great to work with and very accommodating, and he could work within our budget. But it was still, it's not like he didn't get paid. He got paid well. And then for any other songs, worked with some local bands that were featured in the film, so they were quite reasonable, and then some royalty-free classical music. But the composer is probably the biggest fee.
Mike was one of the highlights of this process of making that film. He was a huge surprise. I can't say enough about the contribution that he made to pulling this film together. When you see the film and you can listen to his score, it really blew us away, like Spencer said, and gave me a far deeper appreciation for scoring. And I already appreciated scoring, but after my experience with Mike, you could almost take a bad movie and make it good with that kind of talent. Not that I would suggest doing that, but that's how powerful that was. And the other thing, I think we were very fortunate to get a Post Audio House that we did out in LA, who those guys just did a phenomenal job with the ADR, Foley, and everything. And our film has benefited because of that, and it's raised the production level to a point that I think would match any feature film out there in the market today. It was that good. So if that's the kind of career path you want to take, I applaud you.
I think it's a good story too about what we refer to as sweat equity, right? It's sending them an email versus waiting for someone to contact you, or giving them the product before they even oh, you can turn it in Monday. No, I'm going to turn it in tomorrow. Like, really taking the time to do that extra work. A lot of people fall into sort of the rut. Well, I'll just go along with what they need to do, and I'll deliver it when it needs to be, this, that. But it's really those that stand out that push forward and take the time to do what very few other people are going to do. That's going to help you guys stand out. So keep that in mind as you build your repertoires and your careers.
Yeah, and don't kid yourself. Smart producers can tell whether you're there with passion or whether you're there looking for a paycheck. And if they've got multiple candidates to choose from, which one do you think they're going to choose? Especially at levels like this, where it requires so much work and so much effort and so much passion to pull it off, because you don't have $40 million to pay people exorbitant wages.
Do we have any online questions at this point? We have anyone question there? Yep.
Is it on? Yes, thank you for coming. I appreciate you. Also, in the creative process, do you ever feel like a sense of anxiousness or anxiety, or is there always like this calm security, like you always are in control, like everything's going to happen when it's supposed to happen?
It's mostly, unfortunately, the former. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of stress. And it's a huge undertaking making a film. I remember about 6 weeks before shooting, Thurman and I were looking at all of our permits that we pulled and, going over our location scout and everything. And Thurman said to me, he said, is there a chance still that we could potentially push this production back a couple months and do a little bit more pre-production? And what you have to appreciate and understand is that you're never really going to be ready, right? You are going to have to leap in with both feet at some point, and it's good to do that. And I said to Thurman, I said that, this is the best film that we have ever made, but it won't be the best film that we will ever make. We're going to make mistakes. We've learned so much from this film. If we use the exact same crew and cast and they had the same budget, it would be a 10x probably better film because of everything that we've learned through this process, these 2 years. There's a lot of anxiety, and it feels, there's a lot of critics, right? And a lot of voices, a lot of negativity. Our film has been featured in some of the Hollywood Reporter press and some of the industry trades. So it has a lot of exposure, and you get people all over the world commenting and criticizing and everything, right? Praising, criticizing. And it's unfortunate, but it seems like, if you get one voice of criticism, it drowns out maybe 10 voices of praise. But you really have to continue to remind yourself why you're doing this. And even though you are anxious, I think the anxiety and the fear that you have, especially going into the first night on set, it just shows you, it's an indicator about how important this is to you and what a big deal it is. And that's something great, right? I mean, that's what you remember and you tell your kids about, because it's that fearful and that overwhelming, it's worthwhile. That's where life is.
I want to underscore something that Spencer said, because one of the reasons that we're here, one of the reasons we have a feature film being released in 8 days is because we went out and we made a film. Now that may seem a little bit, obvious, but there are a lot of people that talk about making movies and they talk themselves out of making the movie. There's a lot of people that are not ever going to make a movie because they're never going to be ready to make a movie. And like Spencer said, you're not ever going to be ready to make your movie. And even when you think you're ready to make your movie, it's only because you're too ignorant to realize what you don't know about the process you're just getting ready to step into. So be bold, be courageous, be confident, and go make the movie. Start. And in the process, somehow you'll find a way to resolve the problems, to find the answers to the solutions, to find the solutions to the problems that come up, because it is a collaborative effort, and it will somehow work out. You'll somehow get across the finish line if you have the passion to be where you're at. And the other thing I want to say about this guy here, he's one of the hardest working directors in Hollywood. He works circles around anybody. I don't care who they are. And on set, we could tell you backstories that would raise the hair on your neck about problems that we had, but he never showed any fear. He kept his cool, he kept his calm, even with actors who I would have pulled what little hair I have left out in dealing with him. But as a director, he couldn't afford to do that, and he really did a great job in handling some of those problems, and there will be problems.
Well, and I would say, based off of what Ian and Alex had talked about earlier, the way the crew feels and stuff like that, I mean, you got to consider, when you're a producer or director, I mean, you literally have the weight of the entire production on your shoulders. And so there are times where, you could be losing it or something like that, but not once, based off of what they were talking about, not once did they see that from either of you guys. And the producer and director, and them, they know the nitty gritty. They know what's going on, what's good, what's bad, all this stuff. But to not show it, to not scream and throw stuff or this or that, especially as PAs, sometimes you get to be in the areas where no one else is. Even some of the crew, you're in the back bringing coffee or whatever to where director is and all that. To not see all this stuff, I think is a tribute to being a good filmmaker and not causing problems on set, which will only expound any other problems you currently have by working on this scene and you end up causing an issue, well, now suddenly this scene has a problem. So these problems we were just worried about, now we just added a whole bunch more on because we couldn't focus enough, or we couldn't put on our game face, so to speak, or whatever. So props to you guys for having that kind of attitude. I think that's something that you guys should take with you on whatever you work on, whatever department you're in as well.
Definitely.
Cool. We have any other? Yes. Can we get a mic?
Have a quick question. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your release strategy? So about, VOD and streaming, and obviously, getting it on screens, and also about your discussions with the distributor. Was it a negotiation, or was it something that they brought that to the table, and you were on board, or was it a back and forth?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, if you know more about your distribution strategy than your distributor does, it's really kind of a waste of time and money to be talking to a distributor. So when we went to our distributor, the one that we ultimately wound up signing with, it was because we were looking for their advice and counsel and expertise. That's what we were buying, along with a lot of other things that we were buying from them. So we listened very carefully. Ultimately, it had to be our decision. We were in a unique situation because the fact of the matter is we probably knew our market, our target market, better than our distributor did, because our market was so different. But nevertheless, the processes and the mechanism for reaching that market was something that they were very helpful in identifying for us. For example, our release, you were asking about our release strategy. So the industry is changing somewhat, dramatically, actually. And with the studio system going through some of the metamorphosis that it's currently going through, we didn't have a lot of options. For a small theatrical release, we could not, we made a decision that it wasn't in our best interest to wait 90 days before we could start selling DVDs. And that left us with pretty much day and date, releasing, and that severely limited the number of screens that we could go into. And so we weren't able to get the best screens necessarily out there. We did get some very good ones, but it would have been nice if we would have had more preferred screens. I remember the screen that we're talking about in New York. There was one in Manhattan that was going to cost us $10,000. And we decided, for that much money, I could buy 3 more screens in Philly and Charlotte and, Nashville. So we decided to move across the river into North New Jersey, and we booked a screen there. Using that money, we saved it, and we bought 3 other cities. So those kind of things are decisions that you have to make, but you listen to your distributor, and they will help you through that process. Does that answer your question, or okay? You want to add anything?
Well, the 90-day window, right? For all the studios, whenever they release, Wonder Woman, it cannot come out of theaters and on video on demand at day 89. Has to wait for 90 days. But our culture isn't that patient anymore, right? And so it's sort of an archaic system. And studios have the money to double spend P&A, where they can promote their theatrical release, and then they can promote their video on demand or DVD release. But we don't have that luxury. We spend what we can on P&A, and we give an option to audiences, and it seems like audiences like options today, with Netflix and iTunes, and yet still making it accessible in theaters. And so a day and date release, we spend our P&A funds that we have and promote this and give our audiences options, which is where the industry is going, just like the claps and now the whatever is rebirthing out of the music industry. Whenever you could download music for free, and it collapsed all the music industry, and now there's iTunes. And it's so cheap and it's so easy that you may as well just spend the $29 or $99 or whatever it is now to just buy a song. And the film industry is right on the cusp of that. And the theater chains that are conglomerates, and now the biggest theater chain, which is AMC, which is owned by the Wanda Group in China, they are losing money every quarter. And so whenever the studios decide that they don't want to double spend P&A, and they're going to team up and they're going to break that 90-day window, I think a lot of our major chain theaters will probably collapse. I don't know what's going to come out of that, but we need to be ready to embrace that and run into that and not allow, and I think there could be a lot of benefits in that too, right? No more tentpole superhero movies that audiences don't want, and not spending inordinate amounts of money on ticket prices, and giving audiences what they actually want, which is original independent films and stories, original stories. And I think studios could go back to that. But there's a lot of speculation. Even the president of Lionsgate said a couple weeks ago that day and date release will be available for all films maybe within a year. So it's very exciting, right? This day and date release could be the new model for all films, where you can watch it on iTunes the same dates in theaters. And a lot of people have pushed for that. I myself love seeing films in theaters. Anytime I can see a movie, I see it in theaters. But audiences want options today.
And I think that's something that students need to focus on, is the landscape changing.
Yes.
With the digital age and what have you. I mean, it's, even from when I was growing up to now, is totally different than what I remember, both in even how movies are sold. And, it's not as much star power or what have you than there previously was. So a lot of the landscape, you guys need to pay attention to that, because when you get out, it's going to be different probably when you get out. So you need to be aware of that when you hit the ground running with your projects. This is what we're going to have to start doing. We have a question online.
All right. So I have two questions. The first set is for Spencer and Thurman. What would be the most challenging experience while making this film, but also the best learning experience?
Good question.
That's a great question. All right. What was the most difficult, and yet what was... Come again?
What was the most challenging experience, and but also turned out to be the best learning experience?
I mean,
Does it have to be the same, or could it be two different experiences?
Man.
Does the best learning experience have to be the most difficult experience?
There's a couple ones that are kind of overarching, right? Like just making a film. Like I remember distinctly the very last shot of the film and how relieved I was that we had gotten the film in the can. But I think probably the script, I'm going to say, is going to be what was the most challenging, but also the greatest learning. So whenever we shot the film, we had a couple of extra scenes. Didn't know that they were extra. Could have known that they were extra. But the film is 90 minutes long. Whenever I finished editing the first cut of the film, it was 2 hours and 40 minutes long. So I cut out a lot of the picture. And what was a really great education turned out to be one of the greatest learning experiences, is that whenever our distributor needed a closed caption file to save money, which is what independent filmmakers do, to save money, what I did is I adapted the screenplay as we took it to set, and I adapted it so that it reflected what was actually in the final cut of 90 minutes in that closed caption file, so I could save money creating a closed caption file. And so it was so interesting to me to see about how much the script changes and kind of reverse engineering it. So if we had taken the script as it was, that we actually shot it, we would have saved so much time on set, we would have saved so much money, and we've been able to focus more on the scenes that were truly essential. And sometimes you're not going to know that, right? You're always probably going to have some deleted scenes. But I think cutting out the non-essentials was the greatest learning experience for me.
Well, I'm surprised he picked that, because I would have to agree with Ian here that by far the hardest scene was the bar scene. And generally that's the one that he picks, but the bar scene was probably about the worst, most difficult, horrendous set that I've ever been on in my life, and I can't imagine anybody else not agreeing with that was there. I mean, we were shooting the bar fight in an establishment that was actually an ongoing business, and they were still doing business on the other side of the room. And we got there. What time? We were probably there about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, at least with the crew, setting up and talent came in around 11 or 12, and they were there for 12 hours shooting this scene. And they had like 4 or 5 air conditioners, window units in the place. But by the time we actually started shooting later on that afternoon, everybody who had come to the bar for extras, they were like drunk as a skunk because they'd been drinking over on the other side of the bar all day long. They came out, the temperature started going up, the lights were on. We just had to go through. The temperature probably reached in excess of 120 degrees in this room. We were in there for hours. By the time the night was over, there were only about 3 people still standing. That was Spencer, our DP, and who else?
The talent.
Daniel, I think. And so they were moving all the lights. Everybody else, and we had some pretty big bulky guys on set, but everybody was just exhausted, and that was probably about the hardest experience in making the film. For me, one of the things that I learned was in doing another film, I would never do another film without having some on-site editing dailies. It's something that in a ultra low budget movie you're probably going to want to sacrifice and save money on, but in the final analysis you really don't save money on that. We would have loved to have identified some problems, particularly audio problems that we had, down in Florida before we got back to LA and started cutting the film. We wound up having to do a lot of ADR to cover issues that arose that we probably should have identified a lot earlier. So, that was maybe one of the biggest learning experiences for me. So we're gonna have our editors cutting this film. We're gonna take a week off when we're finished production, and when we come back from our cruise, we're gonna watch the first cut of the film. That's how we're gonna do it next time, right? That's a good question.
Yeah.
Oh yes, 2-part.
Oh. Wait, what?
The question was for Christopher and Ian. Do you have any advice for the students when they start their first job?
It's Chris.
I got to think for this one. I've been up for a while.
That's what I'm gonna think too. Do you mean first job as in first working set?
Correct.
Well, I was fortunate enough that even I was at Full Sail when I was still doing my school. I went and actually worked on the set, so it was my first movie, and I was only, I think, 10, 11 months into my program or something like that. So I was out pretty early, and this gave me some real world experience. But some tips I would say is, if you paid attention at Full Sail, things can change based on where you are and working. Like some of the terms that we used weren't the same, and you have to adapt to the new terms that those people are learning. So some tips are that you should, when you go to your teachers, you should ask for more of so in ours, it's a C47 for a clothespin, but for some it's a bullet, and it would be good to ask what different names for different things are depending on what area you're working in.
I think my biggest thing is roll with the punches. If someone asks you something that you're not very familiar with, then just kind of be like, all right, well, I'll figure it out, as well go away and ask other people for help. There were a lot of people on the crew, like the second AC and the first AC were really, really helpful for me, for helping me help out the camera team and all their stuff, because the second or third day I had to help rig a car rig with their fancy new camera they had just gotten, and that was one of the most scary things in the world. The DP had me and another PA redo it like 4 or 5 times, and I was like, I've never rigged this before, this is super intense, but I was like, let's just go with it. So they ask you to do something different, just ask a few different questions, but roll with it, don't be afraid.
And And don't be afraid to ask for help. That's like a big thing, because if you don't know how to do it and you don't know how to do it right, it really can bite you in the butt later.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Like
it doesn't
Ian
help
was
the
saying,
production
people
out
do
either.
Ian was saying people do stuff different, and they did stuff a lot differently than Full Sail was used to. So it's like just kind of adapt and learn.
And I would add too that be careful when you're asking for help. When they're busy trying to do something, that's not a time to ask someone, hey, how do you do this over here? But certainly if they're asking you, like they're saying, if they're asking you to do a specific job and you haven't done it before, I don't think I've ever worked with anyone that doesn't enjoy imparting knowledge onto somebody else. For some reason, film crews they love doing that, especially the older generation guys. Let me show you how it used to be done, or how they love that kind of stuff. Plus, they just want it to be done right. I mean, if you don't know how to do it, you're inquisitive about it in a sense of, because I want to know how to do it properly so I can make this project better, not not so I can just learn and apply it later on. It is a part of the production. It's to make a better product at the end of the day.
Absolutely,
Yep.
Awesome. Right.
Well, I wanted to say something real quick. When Thurman was talking about the bar scene, and we were doing the filming and setting up prior, I think we were there at 9 a.m. or something, and we were black wrapping the whole building to get it ready for this night scene and make sure it was dark in the bar. And working in the conditions that we were working in, the place got hot, but the good thing about the crew is we didn't complain. We worked through the heat and all the technical aspects that happened during that, and we worked to make this bar scene come to be I would say probably one of the best scenes in the movie too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
And again, it's those situations where having a good crew, it doesn't make that situation as bad. Like if you really didn't want to be there, you hated the crew, it just makes that situation that much more unbearable. Like, why am I doing this when I don't even want to be here at all? And it's those kind of weird things that you're willing to do as a crew because you just love the art of filmmaking and all that kind of stuff, and you want to make a better film for everyone.
And that was one of those situations. It was such a difficult environment, and there's so many obstacles and so many things that went wrong that you truly, come to the end of yourself and you do whatever it takes to get the shot. I mean, like my DP and myself and our talent, that's who was needed to get the shot, and we stayed up an extra couple hours and finally got out of there around 2 or 3 a.m. and we got the shot. And there's no other option.
I've been waiting with bated breath to hear your question.
Hi, well, I'm still a bit curious about the distribution process because I don't really know much about that. What was your first step in finding a distributor? Who did you go to first after you finished the movie?
Well, the first thing we did just about the time we were finishing our first cut was attend AFM out in Santa Monica, which, was the buyers and sellers market. And we just went around. We hadn't been able to take advantage of setting up appointments. So, we were just knocking on doors and got some business cards. We contacted those people, sent them links for our trailer. We got probably a couple of responses back. We started getting some press and publicity, and actually a few distributors contacted us, and we would have conference calls with them and talk to them, find out what they were trying to sell us, what we needed to sell to them. So that's how that process started. We turned all those offers down, and like I think I'd said earlier, after we hired our publicist, we really relied on the relationship we had with the publicist and the relationships he had with other distributors with films that he had worked on in the past. So that kind of made us feel a little more comfortable, and that was very important. And we wound up signing with a company that he thought would be a good fit for us. So we relied on his knowledge.
Awesome. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate it. We've reached actually beyond our requirement, but it's been worth it. We love having you guys here. Thank you to Thurman and Spencer and Ian and Chris there. We appreciate that. And we hope the best for your guys' project, October 6th.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, and listen, if I can, we really appreciate being here. We appreciate you guys coming out. Please remember October 6th. It's down here locally at the Universal City Walk. Probably on the 5th, we're going to be asking all of our friends to push this out on whatever social media platforms they own and operate. It's imperative for independent filmmakers. We don't have $7 million to go buy a lot of national TV ads and whatnot. So social media is really the key. And as you all well know, opening weekend is the weekend that really sets the tone for any kind of a theatrical release. So if you like us, if you like the film, please get the word out to all the people that you can through all the various social platforms. We'd be very grateful for it.
And that's generationalsins.com.
That's our website, generationalsins.com. Please check it out, and we'd love you to keep in touch with us. If you have a project, Spencer and I are available. Our email addresses are there, and we'll definitely respond to your emails. So, stay in touch.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Awesome.
you.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.